In the heart of a bustling city where glass towers cut the sky and the noise never rested, Zara Khan strolled like she owned the pavement, heels clacking with the arrogance only money could buy, her oversized sunglasses hiding eyes that scanned the world with cold superiority. Daughter of a powerful business tycoon, Zara had never known the sting of struggle. Her days filled with shopping sprees, lavish brunches, and viral selfies flaunted to an adoring online audience. Each morning, her driver would drop her at the steps of the upscale Plaza Mall, and each morning, without fail, she would pass by an old, blind street vendor sitting cross-legged by the entrance, a rusted cart in front of him, filled with handmade incense sticks, clay figurines, and cheap trinkets. He wore a faded kurta, his milky white eyes scanning nothing, head bowed in stillness like a forgotten relic. He never begged, never spoke unless spoken to, and simply sat there with a haunting patience that unsettled Zara for reasons she couldn't explain. She hated how still he was, how he seemed immune to her presence. One morning, irritated by a phone call and annoyed that her reflection in the boutique's window was less than perfect, Zara turned her scorn on the old man. "Can't you go sit somewhere else? This is a luxury space, not your village corner," she snapped, waving a perfectly manicured hand in front of his sightless face. The vendor didn't flinch. He simply tilted his head as if listening to something deeper than her words. That infuriated her even more. "Are you even deaf too? Or just pretending to be blind to get sympathy?" she spat, laughing cruelly as passers-by gave her sidelong glances. Her friend, Malika, giggled, egging her on, and Zara kicked at one of his incense holders, sending the delicate sticks scattering into the dust. The old man remained silent, but Zara could have sworn, just for a heartbeat, that a faint smile curled beneath his white beard. A chill ran through her, but she quickly masked it with a scoff, flipping her hair and striding away. That night, Zara's dreams were strange and sticky, full of whispering winds and the scent of burning sandalwood. She saw herself in the middle of a marketplace, surrounded by blindfolded people reaching out to her, their hands covered in soot, eyes hollow. She woke drenched in sweat, heart racing, the scent of incense still lingering as if someone had lit it by her bed. She laughed it off and blamed stress. The next morning, she passed the vendor again, and though she tried to look away, something in his face caught her eye. He was still smiling, that same unreadable curve of the lips that felt neither warm nor cruel, but ancient. This time she didn't say anything, but her pace quickened. Over the next few days, Zara's world subtly began to warp. Her phone would glitch whenever she scrolled near his picture in her gallery. Her makeup mirror fogged randomly in her air-conditioned apartment, and in the condensation, vague shapes would form, eye sockets, empty and staring. She began hearing whispers in her closet, a language she didn't recognize, low and rhythmic like a chant. During a brunch with influencers at a rooftop cafe, she nearly screamed when she looked down into her mimosa and saw not the bubbly orange of champagne and juice, but cloudy, milky eyes staring back at her from the glass. She blinked, and it was gone. "Zara, you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost," Malika joked, but Zara forced a laugh, brushing it off, though her heart was pounding and her palms damp. That night, she called her therapist, Dr. Hassanin, who suggested she might be repressing guilt or stress, but she brushed that off too. She had nothing to feel guilty about. That old man was just a squatter. Why should she feel bad for calling him out? Yet the dreams worsened. One night, she dreamt she was in a room made entirely of mirrors. In each reflection, she was different, sometimes old, sometimes blind, sometimes screaming, but always alone. A deep voice, gravelly and layered with echoes, whispered, "You were seen." She woke gasping, to find her bedroom door slowly creaking open by itself. Door creaks. No wind, no draft, just the thick, cold silence of 3 a.m. The witching hour. Zara tried sage, candles, even called a spiritual healer her mother once used after a business rival cursed their home. The woman arrived with incense and chants, only to stop abruptly at Zara's bedroom threshold. "There is something ancient here," she muttered. "A watcher." a listener, and it is not pleased. She left abruptly and refused to return. That day, Zara snapped. She stormed down to the street vendor's corner and, ignoring the stares of the crowd, kicked over his incense cart completely, yelling, "What the hell did you do to me? Who the hell are you?" The vendor finally lifted his head fully, and though his eyes were still pale and blind, they seemed to focus on her, drilling through her soul. "I see more than you think," he said softly, his voice dry like crumbling leaves. "In your eyes, they are beginning to see too." With that, he stood, taller than she expected, and simply walked away, leaving his ruined cart behind. Zara froze. For the first time, she didn't feel victorious. She felt hunted. That night, the shadows in her room pulsed like breathing lungs. Her closet door opened and closed without sound. Her phone screen flickered between her selfies and images she'd never taken, photos of her standing beside the old vendor, even though they'd never been close enough. In each image, her eyes were blurred, as if decaying. Zara screamed, throwing the phone across the room. Glass shatters. She tried to sleep with the lights on, but the bulbs burst one by one, until only darkness remained, humming and alive. When she finally fell asleep, she found herself in a different place. Not a dream, but somewhere deeper. She was in an alley, damp and dim, incense smoke curling around her feet. She turned, and the vendor stood at the end of the alley. But his face was wrong. It flickered like a candle flame, ancient and twisted, a blend of man and shadow. "You mocked what you couldn't see," he said, voice now layered with 1,000 others. "Now see what you became." Behind her, she heard footsteps, hundreds of them, and turned to find a crowd of blind figures approaching her, arms outstretched, their faces expressionless. She screamed, running into the darkness, only to find the alley repeating in an endless loop. The vendor at the end, the crowd behind, again and again. When she woke, she was no longer in her bed, but sitting cross-legged on the cold marble floor of her hallway, incense ashes scattered around her, her eyes burning as if she hadn't slept in days. Her reflection in the mirror looked wrong. Her pupils were shrinking, her eyes becoming cloudy, like his. She ran to the window, needing to see daylight, needing proof she was awake. But on the street below, the vendor was gone. Only his cart remained, empty, waiting, watching. Zara didn't leave her apartment for 3 days after that. Not because she couldn't, but because something inside her told her not to. Her world, once loud and filled with attention and filtered adoration, had shrunk to 4 walls, drawn curtains, and a gnawing fear that clung to her skin like damp cloth. Every mirror in her house now stood covered in bed sheets or towels. Anything to stop her from seeing the faint milky clouding of her eyes growing stronger by the day. The influencers she once partied with had begun pulling away too. Texts went unread, messages left unread. She stopped posting selfies altogether, afraid of what might appear in the background, what might stare back. And then the sounds began, whispers in background, not in dreams this time, but during the day. Low whispers from inside drawers, from under the bed, from behind the walls. The incense scent was constant now, no matter how many air purifiers she turned on or windows she opened. It trailed her like a perfume of punishment. Sleep-deprived and desperate, Zara tried reaching her father, but his assistant informed her he was in Dubai on business and wouldn't be back for another week. That night, unable to bear the silence of her apartment, she walked outside, hoping maybe fresh air would help. The city, once her playground, now felt like a stage set for horror. Streetlights flickered erratically as she passed beneath them, and everyone she walked by seemed to momentarily pause, as if their eyes glazed over with a strange recognition before moving on. And then she saw it, his cart, back where it had always been, perfectly arranged, as though it had never been overturned or abandoned. No sign of the vendor, just the cart, standing in quiet defiance. Against her instincts, Zara walked up to it, her heels tapping shakily on the concrete. On the cart sat a single item, a cracked handheld mirror. As she leaned forward to look, her reflection showed not her face, but his. The old man's face. Blind, decayed, whispering something silently. She screamed and fell backward, only to realize the street around her had emptied entirely. Not a soul in sight, not even a sound. She was completely, utterly alone in a city that never slept. Heartbeat intensifies. That night, her dreams morphed into something worse, less symbolic, more real. She stood in a courtroom. The judge was blindfolded. The jury was a row of silent vendors, their eyes like fog glass. Zara sat alone in the center, bound by incense ropes. No one spoke. No one moved. A gavel slammed itself down without hands. Guilty, came the chorus, 1,000 voices in unison. Guilty of arrogance. Guilty of cruelty. Guilty of blindness. She begged, pleaded, screamed she didn't know. She didn't understand what she had done, but their faces remained stone. Then the floor gave way beneath her, and she fell into a pit of mirrors, each one reflecting her face, aging, decaying, whitening around the pupils. She woke with a scream that scraped her throat raw. The mirror beside her bed, though covered, was now cracked. The glass was bleeding. Thick red streaks dripped down from beneath the fabric. She ran to the bathroom to vomit, but instead of bile, her mouth filled with incense smoke, hot, dry, choking, coughing, gagging sounds. She stumbled back, only to see writing begin to scrawl across her fogged bathroom mirror, as if by an invisible hand. You made me invisible. Now you see. The next morning, a news headline made her hands tremble. Blind street vendor found dead in alley, body unclaimed. There was a photo. It was him. Zara dropped her phone. For a second, she felt guilt. Not just fear. Gutrenching guilt. She hadn't known he died. Maybe it wasn't even her fault. But a voice in her head whispered, you didn't need to strike the final blow to be part of the killing. That night, the lights in her building blacked out completely. Her hallway was bathed in unnatural silence. Her neighbors didn't answer when she knocked. She went downstairs only to find the elevator mirroring her, literally. The doors opened to reveal not an empty shaft, but her own reflection, multiplied infinitely, all of them whispering things she couldn't quite hear. She backed away slowly, heart hammering, retreating into the stairwell, only for the lights above each flight to flicker and die as she descended, one by one. Light bulbs buzz and pop. When she reached the ground floor, the lobby was filled with smoke, incense again, and from the haze stepped the old man. But now, he wasn't hunched or quiet. He was tall, his robes swirling like shadow, his face half burnt and half glowing with some inner fire. His eyes still white, but no longer blind. Now they saw everything. You mocked the humble, he said, each word echoing like a thunderclap. Now you will walk their path. The world around her spun. The building faded. She screamed, but no one heard her. She was no longer in her world. She stood now in a vast market, centuries old, dusty, red-stoned, surrounded by stalls with blind vendors, their mouths sewn shut, their ears bleeding incense smoke. She turned in circles, panic rising. One of the vendors pointed a slow, trembling finger at her. Her clothes had changed. She now wore a tattered kurta, no makeup, no jewelry. Her heels were gone, barefoot, broken. She was the vendor now. Her stall was behind her, empty, waiting. And across the plaza, shoppers walked past her without a glance. One woman, a version of herself, walked by, scoffing, throwing a coin at her face. She reached to stop her, to scream, but her voice was gone. Her lips moved. No sound. She had become what she once mocked, trapped in a loop of her own arrogance, screaming silently, begging for justice she once denied. 3 days had passed, or maybe 3 weeks. Zara no longer knew. Time in this new realm bled together like oil and water. She remained trapped in the ghostly market, voiceless and invisible, forced to wit. Shoppers passed her daily, distorted versions of people she once knew. Her friends, her stylists, her online followers, now garbed in apathy, each one repeating her old insults, her careless gestures, her venomous laughs. Every time she reached out to them, her hands passed through them like mist, her fingertips tingling with static regret. Her stall remained empty, save for one item that had begun to appear each morning. A cracked mirror with her reflection fading more and more each time she looked. Her skin now pale, lips bloodless, eyes rimmed with darkness not from makeup but from something deeper, something rotting inside her. The only sound that accompanied her were whispers from behind, constant, shifting whispers that seemed to chant her name in reverse. At night, she didn't sleep. There was no sun, no moon. Only a dull gray sky smeared with shadows that shifted when she blinked. She tried to run once, through the alleys between the stalls, but they bent impossibly, folding into themselves until she was right back at her own cart. The others, blind vendors with sewn lips, began to turn toward her each night now, their faces showing sorrow, not malice. Some reached toward her with shaking hands, as if offering forgiveness she hadn't earned. But each time she tried to speak, her throat would tighten, her tongue would sting, and no words would come. She was beginning to forget the sound of her own voice. One night, everything changed. The ground beneath the market cracked like dried clay, and thick roots burst upward, wrapping around stalls, lanterns, even vendors. Smoke curled up from the fissures. Out of that smoke, he returned, the blind vendor, but now towering, monstrous, a blend of man and myth. His robes shimmered with shifting faces, all women, each one bearing Zara's face in a different phase of cruelty, from smug to savage. "There is one door left," he said, voice like a blade dragged across stone. "One chance. Will you take it?" She fell to her knees, nodding furiously, tears trailing down her cheeks, though she hadn't known she could still cry. The vendors around her vanished, leaving behind scorched footprints. The market crumbled into a spiral staircase that led down, endlessly. She descended. Every step triggered a memory of the first time she laughed at a beggar, the first time she demanded her followers cancel a girl for copying her makeup, the first time she spat at someone who bumped into her. Each step hurt more than the last. By the time she reached the bottom, her knees were scraped raw, her nails cracked and bleeding. At the bottom was a door made of bone and glass. Her reflection in it wasn't her. It was the vendor's face again. He blinked. "Step through," he whispered. "But know this, you will not return as you were." She hesitated. Behind her, the stairs were gone. The door opened with a hiss like steam, and she stepped forward into a world that looked like her own, but twisted. The city was overcast, the streets crowded yet silent. People walked with their heads down, earbuds in, eyes glued to phones, completely unaware of each other. No one acknowledged her. She wandered, confused, until she found herself outside her old building. She entered, but her name was gone from the mailbox. Her key didn't fit. On the street, someone brushed past her and dropped a coin. She stooped to pick it up and saw her reflection in a puddle. She was older, poorer, her face lined with despair. Her eyes, not blind, but full of sorrow. A hand touched her shoulder. She spun around. It was the vendor, alive, but young now. Not blind, not broken. He smiled gently. "Now you understand," he said. "What it's like to be unseen, unheard, forgotten." Zara fell to her knees. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice finally returning, hoarse and thin. "I didn't know." "You didn't try to," he replied. Then he vanished. Her clothes changed again, this time into a vendor's garb. A small cart appeared before her. On it, bracelets, incense, mirrors. She looked around. Nobody saw her. She had returned, not to the supernatural realm, but to a forgotten corner of her own world, cursed to live what she once mocked. A voice echoed faintly from nowhere and everywhere at once. "Justice is not always loud, but it is always heard." Zara no longer remembered how many days had passed since her new life began beneath the tattered awning of her vendor stall. The once polished woman who used to flaunt designer heels and gleaming phones now sat barefoot on a cracked plastic stool, fingers stained with soot from incense sticks and melted candle wax. She had no voice in this world, no social media, no admirers, no name. People walked past her as if she were fog, thin, ignorable, inconvenient. Each day, she watched as dozens of them, so like her former self, sneered at beggars, rolled their eyes at street cleaners, mocked the elderly. She wanted to scream warnings at them, to tell them the cost of cruelty, but the curse that weighed on her throat returned with every attempt. The only company she had were the shadows, long, stretched, and slow-moving even when the sun was high. They often crept along the edges of the alley, slithering like smoke with faces hidden in the blur, whispering her old insults back at her like chants. Pathetic. You're disgusting. Get out of my way. Each phrase stabbed like a knife because they were hers. Her words, once thrown casually, now circling back like crows. She began to realize the horror wasn't just that she'd become what she once scorned, but that she was seen, fully and truly, by the very forces she once ignored. One evening, just as the street lamps blinked on with their dull orange glow and the wind picked up with an unnatural chill, she saw something that made her breath catch. Across the street stood a girl, young, nervous, poorly dressed, reaching for her purse as if ready to drop coins into Zara's bowl. But before she could, a group of laughing influencers stepped between them, blocking her view. One of them was almost a mirror of who Zara used to be. Glossy hair, designer jacket, contempt in her smirk. "Don't waste your cash on trash," the girl snapped, loud enough for everyone to hear. The young woman flinched and walked away, her kindness crushed under social pressure. Zara stood frozen. That moment sparked something deeper than guilt. It was rage, not at the girl, but at the system, the cycle, the rot that she had helped spread. The whispers returned that night, louder than ever. Her sleep, if it could be called that, was filled with visions of hands reaching through smoke, faces turning away in judgment, and the blind vendor's voice echoing. "Now you will see what I saw. Now you will carry what I carried." She awoke in sweat, only to find her cart surrounded by crows. Not birds, but shadows shaped like crows, their eyes gleaming with crimson light. One hopped on her shoulder and whispered, "It begins." That morning, a new power settled into her. She could now hear people's intentions, not their thoughts, but their true hearts. A man who dropped coins in her bowl smiled, but his heart was cold. He did it for social points. Another woman walked by pretending not to see her, but her heart pulsed with sorrow. Zara realized the curse had twisted again. She was no longer just a ghost of society. She was becoming a mirror of its truth. Every cruel action glowed red in her vision. And then, one night, someone from her old life returned. Vanessa, her old friend, her echo, the influencer queen. She stopped across the street, looking confused, then approached the cart. "Weird. You look like someone I used to know," she said, cocking her head. Zara didn't reply. Couldn't. Wouldn't. Vanessa laughed and waved a dismissive hand. "Anyway, I'm doing a TikTok about helping the helpless today. Mind if I use you?" She pulled out her phone and began filming. Zara didn't speak, but the shadows did. Behind Vanessa, they rose, twisting, swirling, taking form. The blind vendor emerged again, this time tall and glowing. Not monstrous, but godlike. Vanessa froze, phone dropping to the pavement. What is this?" she stammered. The vendor spoke softly. "You filmed their suffering. Now live it." He raised a hand, and darkness pulled Vanessa backward into the alley, her screams slicing through the night air like razor wire. Zara didn't flinch. For the first time in her cursed half-life, she felt the balance begin to tip. Justice wasn't about revenge. It was about reflection, about giving the world what it gave, echoing its choices back with clarity. Zara turned to the bowl at her stall. It was full now, not of coins but of stones, each etched with a name, a memory, a moment of cruelty. And as she picked one up, it burned with purpose. She was no longer the mocked. She had become the watcher. The cycle had changed, and she was its keeper now. Zara's eyes, once dulled by regret and sleepless nights, now gleamed with a strange clarity, as if they had absorbed the glow of street lamps, the flicker of distant lightning, and the shimmer of ghostly truths no one else could bear to see. Her silence was no longer helpless. It was watchful, almost reverent, like the stillness of a temple before a storm. The alleyway that had once felt like her prison now responded to her presence. The graffiti shifted subtly in the corners of her vision. The cracks in the walls formed words when she blinked too long, and the shadows, those loyal, whispering figures, clung to her like a cloak. She had become something in between, not entirely human, not entirely cursed, but a vessel for retribution. The vendor, too, appeared more often now, not always as a man, sometimes just as a sound. The tap of a cane on cobblestone, the gentle creak of old wooden wheels rolling unseen, or the jingle of bells that once adorned his blindfolded cart. Zara had come to understand that he was never blind. His curse wasn't the absence of sight. It was the burden of seeing everything and being dismissed, spat on, pitted. His blindness had been society's lie. Now she felt it too, the weight of invisible knowledge, the pain of watching cruelty wrap itself in perfume and social media filters. That night, it happened again. A man in a crisp suit stepped from his car, barking in his phone about deals and deadlines, almost knocking over a child selling flowers. "Get out of the damn way, brat," he hissed, not realizing his voice was the only thing sharp in the soft night air. Zara watched from across the street, unmoving. The child shrank, tears filling her eyes, not for the insult, but for the crushed flowers in her tiny hands. The man marched into the restaurant as if nothing happened. Zara picked up a stone from her bowl. This one felt warm, pulsing faintly. A name whispered itself into her mind. His. She stood. The crows appeared on the power lines like sentries. Lights above flickered and the street grew colder. By the time the man finished dinner and returned to his car, the air felt off, thick, like it was watching him. He clicked his keys. No response. The car wouldn't unlock. He clicked again. From the reflection on his car window, he finally noticed her. Zara, standing across the street, eyes gleaming, her face pale and still, as if carved from the wind. "What the hell?" he muttered. He turned, and the vendor was behind him. No footsteps, no warning, just the smell of rust and roses. "You step on those beneath you," the vendor whispered. "Now feel what it's like below." The man screamed, but his voice vanished into the thickening fog. Zara didn't need to follow. She knew what came next. She simply returned to her stool, the stone in her hand now cold, its work done. But with every name brought to justice, her humanity chipped further. She no longer remembered the sound of her own laughter. She couldn't recall the taste of food, the feel of warmth. Her world was grayscale, carved from cold duty. And yet, a part of her craved more. One day, as she looked into the cracked mirror someone had left beside the alley dumpster, she didn't see herself. She saw the vendor, his eyes now visible, burning gold, full of fire and sorrow. "Are you becoming me?" he asked, without moving his lips. Her throat tightened. Was she? Could this curse, meant to teach, become a prison once more? Her redemption depended on balance, not obsession. But justice was seductive. It made the powerless feel powerful. One night, she found herself holding a stone etched with her own name. It had appeared in the bowl without her noticing. Cold, heavy, final. That's when she knew her time was nearing an end. Not death, perhaps, but transformation. She would either pass the role on or dissolve into it forever. The question was, who deserved to carry it next? She began watching not just the cruel, but the silent. The ones who saw injustice and looked away. The bystanders. The indifferent. Maybe the next keeper wasn't the worst among them, but the one who stood closest to change and chose nothing. The test was coming. She could feel it in the wind, in the chimes on the blind vendor's cart, in the way the street grew quieter each night. Justice was not yet done, but the silence was starting to scream. Zara sat beneath the dim, flickering glow of the alleyway bulb, the stone bearing her name resting in her trembling palm, cold as grave dust. The city no longer felt alive. It was a tomb of motionless bodies pretending to live, where laughter was hollow and kindness had the weight of obligation. Her transformation had drawn to its final act, and though her eyes still belonged to a human face, the depth behind them held storms far older than memory. She was neither savior nor spirit. She had become a mirror, held to the world's cruelty, forcing it to see itself. But tonight, something was different. The wind felt colder, more deliberate, like breath from something ancient exhaling in anticipation. A whisper curled into her ear, not from behind or beside her, but from within. One more, it said. The one who watched you suffer and did nothing. Her breath caught. Faces flashed through her mind. Laughing classmates, apathetic police officers, influencers who had made her humiliation viral. But one stood out clearer than the rest. Marwa, her childhood best friend, who once promised forever but turned her back the day Zara fell from grace. Marwa had watched the video of Zara mocking the vendor go viral and joined the ridicule, resharing it with laughing emojis, feeding the digital bonfire that had destroyed what little humanity Zara clung to back then. But Marwa had moved on, thrived even, built a lifestyle blog on the ashes of Zara's shame, profiting from pity quotes while never once offering real apologies. Zara's hands curled into fists as the bowl before her produced a stone etched in fresh blood-red lettering. Marwa, not carved, branded. The fog that clung to the streets grew denser as she walked toward Marwa's luxury apartment, each step echoing with an invisible heartbeat. Heartbeat, slow and deep. The city lights dimmed around her, buildings groaned, and car alarms shrieked without cause. When she reached the apartment building, the doorman stood frozen, unmoving, as if reality itself was paused. Marwa's penthouse was lit in warm yellows, with floor-to-ceiling windows that made her life look perfect. Zara slipped through the door without touching it. Some doors no longer needed unlocking. Marwa was recording a video, ring light glowing, camera rolling. Hey fam, today I want to talk about how to let go of negativity. The screen flickered. Her voice stuttered. TV static, glitch sound. The reflection in the camera lens no longer showed Marwa alone. Zara stood behind her, pale, silent, her eyes pools of stormlight. Marwa turned, screamed, dropped the phone. Zara, no, this isn't real. You're dead. Gone. Cancelled. You watch me burn, Zara whispered, her voice layered, like hundreds speaking through her throat. You fed the fire. Marwa backed against the wall. I didn't mean to. It was a joke. Everyone was doing it. I was scared too. The vendor's voice echoed through the room, though he was nowhere to be seen. And the ones who fear truth are worse than those who lie. The lights exploded. The room shrank inwards. Shadows bent like living things, wrapping around Marwa as she wailed and begged and pleaded, but Zara remained still, a monument of judgment. Then, everything stopped. Silence. No crying. No flique. Just darkness. When the light returned, Zara stood alone in the apartment. Marwa was gone, but her voice remained, trapped inside a decorative mirror on the wall, repeating her last words in an endless loop. Zara turned, placed the stone beside the camera, and walked out. Her duty was fulfilled. The city, however, was not yet clean. The vendor appeared before her as she returned to the alley, not blindfolded now, but with eyes like twin eclipses. It is time, he said. You have worn the silence long enough. A wind lifted around her, not violent, but lifting, cleansing, like a sigh from the world itself. Her body shimmered, not vanishing, but dissipating, dissolving into smoke, memory, and whisper. Her final thought was not of revenge, but peace, a longing to have been heard before it all went dark. In her place, the bowl remained, and in it, a single stone, smooth, blank, waiting. A girl walked by, one who had once watched cruelty unfold, and turned her eyes away. She paused. Something called to her. She reached down. The stone warmed in her palm. Somewhere far off, a blind vendor smiled.